Good God, what are we doing here? This is an Avalon Hill edition of Alexander the Great, and I found out that this was another game that they pawned off someone else. There was a previous, actually this is the second Avalon Hill edition. There was a previous edition to that in Avalon Hill, of course, but there was another company that did it before that. And there's some interesting things here. First of all, this is a Gary Gygax game. Now, Gary Gygax, for all his imagination, wasn't particularly well known for putting comprehensible rules together. When D&D was first put out in the Three Little Books, there was a lot of snark and such not about how impenetrable in some cases it just was, and sometimes some typos, etc., just made it completely misinterpreted even. Okay, that's fine, but then let's add a layer of Don Greenwood on, and it's interesting because he always has his own little way of things here. I haven't read the designer notes. I really ought to. The historical notes I don't really need. But let's see what we got here. Game redesign and rules coordination. Okay. So you kind of know what to expect whenever Don Greenwood gets involved in something. It's not going to come out with clean, good rules. And quite simply, there aren't a lot of pages. I mean, there actually are for this era, but they're small pages. It's not a huge amount of rules. But it's actually a fairly complicated game, I think, with paying some attention to things that you kind of wouldn't expect in, that box shape from Avalon Hill. It's a little bit later than the classics, but it looks like one, right? Beautiful, beautiful map, of course. This is supposed to be Gaugamela. Yeah, whatever. And, let's see. We can zoom in on the pieces. You have different size pieces here, and they have sort of NATO type symbols on them to tell you, this is infantry. This is heavy infantry. You got your cav here. You're gonna have elephants in this case, not observation posts, chariots, horse archers, etc. In general, you'll see they're different sized units. These are the heavy infantry and the phalanx units. We'll get into. I don't even know what to do with this game in some ways. You've got circular leaders in it with Darius, who I will mispronounce that way, and Alexander, who also was not pronounced that way. And you got a kind of interesting combat chart, especially for this era. You're going to be working on the attacker's morale, the odds, and the defender's morale. And this is actually the most exciting thing about this game to me, is you have this sort of tracking of morale, and as you start losing units, presumably your morale is going to go down, but it can go up from winning battles, etc. And you track the absolute change in the morale here. You can't go above your starting morale, I guess, so we're not going to see, what we'll see is a degrading at first, but you can recuperate that by winning engagements. And I don't know what else to say. Let me give you a little history on this from me. I was kind of more of an SPI snob, and while I may have seen this, I'm pretty sure I did it at the store. I would look at the Avalon Hill catalog, and I'd say, what a hideous looking game. And I would think about, the other classics type games, And those that were kind of, yeah, it's kind of a mess over there. But those that were kind of land-based, I just did not trust Avalon Hill's capability of putting together a decent tactical battle game of any kind. At least anything that was, pre-World War II, let's say. Well, when I did pick this up, I was kind of pleasantly surprised with the fact that this is not, and I picked it up at a tag sale or something, under $2, no question. And it's complete. A long, long time ago. But I came to this fairly late, like I did with many of the Avalon Hill classics. It was kind of a matter of, yeah, well, okay, I'll pick it up if it's cheap. Sure. And I think I got this, I had a whole garbage bag full of games that I picked up. Some guy's mother was basically saying, these are just going. Yeah. I'm just thinking about my own situation, and that I do have a lot of games in my mom's basement still, that some of which I probably should recover somehow. I have other things too, but anyway, my memory of it was rather fond. Like, ooh, this was a surprisingly better, more detailed game than I would have expected from its era. Then I started reading these rules, and I'm like, wow, I can't really make hide nor hair out of some of the things, and some of the wordings and choices and positionings are just not really well done, but okay. Finally, I looked up what my rating was on it, and I gave it like a 5. So this went from, oh, I was kind of excited about starting this to, yeah, between the rules and what I thought of it before, I'm not sure this is going to be as much fun as I had hoped. Anyway, let's take a look at the pieces. They have a number of values on them. So we'll take ones that are a little bigger because they're actually readable. And my eyes can barely see these suckers. Now you can see them just fine on the camera. But so you have a movement factor up here. You have some information here, which if they're archers is of some importance. But if they're not archers and they're not cavalry, well, it does, there are still effects. Anyway, the numbers on the bottom, these are the strength of the unit depending on facing, which means this is their frontal facing combat value, this is their flank facing combat value, and then this is their rear facing combat value. Now you can't attack out the rear, but it's used for both offense and defense. All right, sequence of play. Almost an I go, you go. I mean, for a tactical game, it does what you'd expect out of its era. And honestly, I'm not sure. This may have been one of the earlier of the. I'm not sure when Panzer Bush came out. It was probably a little earlier than this, but in terms of the ones that were not World War II tactical, one of the earlier attempts to kind of convert that minis warfare type genre into a board game. I always think of Berg as having kind of started that off with TSS, but in a lot of ways this actually is doing it too. And you have to remember Gygax wrote some minis rules. Okay. So first the Macedonian player gets to move all his counters, basically. And then the Persian gets to fire defensive fire with his missiles. Now, there's some weird stuff that goes on here, which is to say that there's sort of simultaneous fire, but it's not really represented that clearly in this. And then the Macedonian is allowed to make melee type combats, but he's also, I think, allowed to throw his missile combats in here at the same time. And they happen concurrently with those. So if you took damage, you have to kind of try to remember what's going on. And you'll be using the combat table with all those comparisons. And it comes down to an odds attack. You make a roll. and you'll take losses, and the loss rolls are a little different, So you'll see things like half defender eliminated. That is not necessarily what you think it is. It's a little different, and that's a little weird. Okay, and then you keep fighting, and as you fight, you're going to be tracking the morale over on a temporary morale table. At the end of the turn, at the end of both players' turns, you'll be applying the differences on the temporary scale to the morale status gauge. So your morale is fixed for the entirety of the turn. One engagement doesn't affect the next engagement immediately. And then you switch sides, and the Persian gets his turn, which is exactly like the Macedonian side. Okay, so victory condition. We'll just work our way through the rules like I always do, but this is going to be fun. So the Macedonians win if Darius is eliminated and both Persian baggage camps are captured and held simultaneously. These are the Persian baggage camps. Do we have terrain here? Yeah. Okay, so level ground is any hex other than a slope containing any amount of green, which is most of the battlefield. Rough terrain is anything entirely in browns. This shit over here, these, whatever. Slopes are continuous yellow brownish line of hexes extending from A12 to X1. Jesus. So A12, A. Looks like it's here. And what is the next one? X1, which is going to be way down in that corner. And I wouldn't say that they continuously extend, so whatever. The high side of the slope is bordered by brown hex sides, the low side by green. So I'm just going to say everything that's got this kind of yellowish shit in it is slope. Whatever. We'll figure this shit out. Okay. Movement. Now, there's a set of advanced rules. We're looking at the basic rules. This is like standard Avalon Health stuff. No optional rules, though. But there are game balance changes. You can move all your stuff. They can move up to their movement factor. Now, in the basic game, you can move without regard to facing. Facing comes in the advanced game for movement. All movement must be completed before resolution of any battles. You can't move through an enemy unit. You can't generally move through an overstacked or a fully stacked hex, nor you can't move in through a situation that would overstack the hex. So you'll see some of these places have more than one piece in it. The stacking rules are pretty simple. 2 small pieces can be in a space. 1 big piece can be in a space, and leaders are free. Okay. All cavalry, chariots, and elephants can move an extra hex when charging. Units can only use their charge movement if they end in an attack. Terrain affects both movement and combat, and we have a terrain effects chart. Is it on the back? No, it's just in the rulebook. It's not too useful because you're probably not going to be running around much in the hills. When you move your counters, be sure you face the hex side that you want them to face. Facing is important in this game. If 2 Class B units, that's the smaller guys, are in the same hex, they must be parallel to each other, one behind the other. Now, they can either be facing in the same direction, or they can be creating sort of a square. Class C units, the leaders can join other units. All right, I went through the stacking. Whichever side is moving the counters is considered the attacker. There's no zones of control. You have to be facing the unit that you're going to attack, and you can only make it from the front face of the unit. This is where the directional arrow, which is on every single unit, faces towards. Units do not have to attack. Cavalry chariots and elephants can have their attack factor doubled when they're charging. And you can't attack at less than odds of 1 to 6 if you end up being somehow forced to do so, and there are some cases where you're forced to attack. You will be eliminated without loss to the enemy. You defend based on your facing. A frontal attack will defend against any of the 3 frontal hexes, flank attacks to these, and rear here. But remember, your actual attack has to be out the front, the absolute front. Now here this example is kind of okay, but sometimes they put examples in here and it's not clear that they're examples. If you're attacked from a facing with a 0 defense factor, you lose because your odds are going to hit the automatic victory levels. But it is possible that that 0 could be increased. Units only attack once per turn, except for missile units, which have some special rules, which we'll get to. You can only attack a unit once per phase. If 2 or more units want to attack an enemy, they have to combine their values. If one attacking unit attacks 2 or more defending units, the defense factors of the defending units are totaled into a single defense factor. You have to be you have to be adjacent to all units you're attacking, and you can only attack directly forward. So you might ask, well, what can you do that attacks more than 1 unit? If they're stacked, you may attack more than 1 unit. At least that's my interpretation of this. There may be a set of questions. Yeah, there's a set of questions and answers here, and we'll see. Maybe I'll have some things wrong. Combat factors cannot be split between battles. If 2 Class B counters occupying the same hex are attacked, they must be attacked separately. Okay, well, you can't attack 2 units then. I don't know what the hell it's talking about. Right? There's this kind of problem throughout the rolls. You can only attack through your front hex, or is it only through your frontal hexes? Interesting. No, only from the front face of the unit. Okay, can this guy attack? Red can't attack blue 9 to 8 because the carrion unit is not in attack position against the Thracian unit. Yeah? I mean, the Thracian unit's here, the carrion unit's here. That's pretty obvious. The battle must be split into 2 attacks if the red wants... so the example's fucked up, too. If red wants to attack both blue units, the odds would be 6 to 4. Okay, so it looks like you can attack out all your 3 frontal facing hexes, which is not what I thought the game said. Okay. So you can still attack 2 units at once, but you can't attack 2 in the same hex, which I thought you could do. Yep. I don't even want to read all this. These are an example, and you know I hate examples. Okay, well, now that we're talking about combat, let's jump over to the terrain effects on movement in combat. Rough terrain, you have to, these are painful. You have to stop on the first rough terrain hex you enter. Thereafter, any movement through rough terrain is at 2 hexes per turn, regardless of movement factor. Should you return to plain terrain, the first hex traveled in rough terrain in the course of that turn costs 2 movement points. I think it still stops you. So I guess the first time you move into rough terrain, it's only 1 movement point. I don't know. Units must always stop on the first rough terrain hex entered when leaving plain terrain, regardless of the number of times the unit has previously been in rough terrain. In combat, there's no charge bonus, attacking into or from rough terrain, and elephants will be at half strength when they're attacking into or from rough terrain. Slopes, you have to stop on the first slope hex encountered. Thereafter, movement along the slopes is 2 hexes per turn, just like rough terrain, regardless of movement factor. Should you move off the slope at any time, you have to again stop. There's no penalty for leaving a slope, but if you first travel along that slope for 1 hex, that hex costs 2 movement factors. Units on slopes or high ground have their strength doubled on both offense and defense against the units attacking or defending on lower ground only. A defense factor of 0 becomes a 1, because 0 times 2 is 0. If a unit is attacked from lower ground and high ground, there's no doubling effect. There's no doubling for attackers either if the defenders are both low and high ground. Finally, the baggage camp, you must stop when you enter it. There are 2 here and 1 there. They're key to this. Hey, I didn't go over what the Persian victory was. I didn't go over the whole victory. Units must stop upon entrance. It doubles the defense factor of any unit inside. Zeros become 1. No charge bonus permitted. Okay, let's jump back to the victory because I got confused there. Okay, so Darius eliminated and both Persian baggage camps captured and held simultaneously. Persian morale goes down to 0. The Persians win if Alexander's eliminated, or the Macedonian morale is dropped to 0. If the game somehow ends with neither side achieving victory conditions, then the side with the higher morale wins a partial victory. I'm not sure how that can happen, but does it say how the game ends if nobody's going to win? Not there. I guess if people leave. Okay. Let's go to some of the more complex stuff. Missile units, or more crappy rolls. Missile units are allowed to engage normally, or they may missile attack, but they can't do both. They include archers, javelins, and horse archers. Missile units have 2 attack zones. They may attack normally, or they may missile attack units 2 hexes away from them. Their missile attack zone is like a radius going out from just extending their normal 3 hexes that they can attack out to two hexes away. Missile units may always select their target from any unit within range by firing missiles over adjacent units, whether friendly or enemy. Okay, which is a little weird. In addition to missile attacks during their portion of a complete turn, missile units can also add their frontal combat factors in defense of friendly units which are in the same or an adjacent hex, providing at least 1 attacking unit is in the missile unit's zone of fire. Of course, if the missile unit itself is being attacked, it must defend. Why is this of course? It must defend itself and cannot hit the others. Okay. Missile units may also fire offensively at enemy units during the defensive phase. This fire occurs after enemy movement but prior to enemy attacks. And there is a space for this. The effects of this... Now, this is also... which I think means you can do both, because this is in addition to any missile attacks during their portion of a complete turn, but I don't know. Maybe this will be in the questions. Because Avalon Hill likes to do this. Oh, we fucked up the rules so much. Let's add a series of questions to try to specify what we actually meant rather than rewriting the rules so that they were clear. That's a Don Greenwood special right there. Okay. The effects of this fire may alter enemy attacks, either by retreating or eliminating part or all of the attacking force. Missile fire may only be diverted to hexes covered by the unit's frontal combat factor. A missile unit firing at enemy units in the secondary zone, which I guess they mean 2 hexes away, including enemy missile units, is not subject to adverse combat results as a result of the attack. It may, however, be counterattacked by a missile unit, and we'll see. Yeah. Okay. If a missile unit is partially or wholly eliminated by the opposing missile fire during the defensive fire phase, it may still fire return fire at the strength previous to the loss, for all missile fire during one combat portion of a turn is considered simultaneously. Now, what's interesting about this put this in here, is that when we look at, and again, these rules are just terrible. When we look at the sequence of play, you move, there's defensive fire phase. The odds that the Macedonian wants to make for attacks are all calculated at once, and then the attacks are resolved battle by battle. It's not really clear that there's any place where the attacker, where the phasing player gets to fire his missiles, and nor is there any kind of, I mean, the indication that they get to throw their missiles into melee combats is sort of there, but, you know, I just don't know. Okay. But I think what happens is those are resolved during the regular combat phase. And the defensive player can throw missile fire in during melee. And can he do it with units that missile fire in a semi-offensive fashion during the defensive fire phase? We don't know yet. Okay. Charge bonus. Whenever cav chariots or elephants moved from one or more hexes to attack, their attack factor is doubled. Special units. Class C units can be stacked with other, these are the leaders, can be stacked with other counters. What are their effects? The army commander gives you morale table 1, which corresponds with full best army morale, no matter what. If he's stacked with an attacking unit or a defending unit. The army commander also gives you 2 extra dice that you get to roll, and you pick the best one if he's attacking or defending. Only 1 die is rolled for combat, so I guess he can affect the opponent's die roll. Okay. The army commander involved on both sides, they knock each other out in terms of the effects. They don't kill each other. The Class C unit must be adjacent to the enemy units in question to demand extra die rolls. He cannot call additional die rolls for participating in an attack or defense due to being stacked on a missile unit, which is firing 2 hex range, or in defense of an adjacent unit not in the same hex. Class C units have no combat factors. If they're attacked alone in a hex, they're just killed. They can't attack by themselves. If they're in a hex with other units, they're eliminated if all the other units are eliminated. When the commanding officer units, different from the army commander, commanding officers are involved, they get a plus 5 points to their morale factor for the attack. And the commanding officer units get 1 additional reroll. These can partially offset the army commander's capabilities. In addition, if you have 2 commanding officers in a battle, they add together, or if you have an army commander and a commanding officer, they add together, and all their effects take place. Of course, you're not going to get above the morale level 1, but your extra die rolls. Cav chariots. The attack factor of Cav chariots is halved if they attack missile units frontally. This halving does not apply when missile units are adding their defense to an adjacent unit, rather than being attacked frontally themselves. Neither Cav nor chariots are allowed to frontally attack phalanx counters unless it's in coordination with an attack against both the front and the flank and or rear of the phalanx. I'm going to need to pause. The factors of standing chariot units. Now, what that means is iffy. But let's go. Which are attacked by missile units are halved for the purpose of that attack. Okay, so there's 2 possible meanings to that. One could mean it's just sitting there on the board, and if you shoot at it, it's standing. Another could mean it's locked in combat. These terms aren't defined. I don't think. I maybe speak too fast. There is a little difference. Nope, no standing is listed there. Okay. And that having described above applies only to the determination of odds. When they actually are going to take their losses, those are calculated with their full strength. Okay, as I said, I need to pause. least take some tea. Some more of this Chrome. And this is a game of special cases in Chrome. It really is. Which is fine. It may be the only way to handle it, but I prefer the elegance of like GBOH for handling the Chrome, baking it into a table instead. Elephants will not, although obviously some rules like elephants don't fit in well. Elephants will not frontally attack phalanx units unless the phalanx is also being attacked from the flank or rear. Mercenaries. Mercenaries will automatically desert when the morale factor of their side drops below 10, unless they're with either army commander or a commanding officer. When the morale factor drops to 5, all of its mercenaries are removed from the map board no matter what. They will not count against morale losses, though. They won't generate more losses. Once removed from the board, the mercenary units won't come back. When the mercenary unit is completely surrounded by enemy units, it will surrender. No battle needs to take place. The mercenary unit now defects to its captors, and on the turn after it was surrounded and captured, it may be used by the captors just as any other friendly unit. The mercenary unit may be recaptured by the side it formerly fought for, and all of the above rules will once again apply. I hope to hell we don't see that, because that doesn't sound very believable. I'm not saying that mercenary units didn't switch sides occasionally, but it certainly doesn't sound like the kind of thing that was constantly happening in battle. Ah, I'm on your side now, leave me alone. Morale. The morale is going to be indicated by a series of different things that cost you or gain you points. And I'll not go through them all. This kind of states something, but I'm not sure it's the same something as is over here. I'll try to go with these, but we'll see, and we'll make some examination to see if they're the same, because if they are, I'd rather use the back of the book maybe. And these are going to be calculated on the temporary morale table until at the end of the turn, then they get translated over. And then this is one of them examples, which isn't called out as an example, with rules embedded right under it, not called out as not the example. Okay. Automatic elimination. We're getting close to the end, actually. Odds. It's a big booklet, but it doesn't have much. Many of the pages are not real. Odds of 5 to 1, or their designer and historical notes. Odds of 5 to 1 with the defender completely surrounded by attackers, or odds of 7 to 1 in any case, will be an automatic elimination. Now, this is a weird rule. Whenever automatic elimination occurs, the units not involved in the attack may simply move over the eliminated unit as if it was not there. This took me a really hard time to understand, but the concept here is they are kind of in limbo during the movement phase. If you set things up and declare you're going to attack with these factors, you can then keep moving through the unit, through the units that are being destroyed, as well as through your own units. However, you have to pay attention to the current stacking limitations, including the stacking values of enemy units that are in there. So you may be able to pulse one unit per turn through some little unit that's being destroyed. But that's about it. And then you're allowed to occupy the hex. So the actual elimination seems to happen during the combat phase, and I'm not going to go over hacking on those rules. They are really kind of a mess. As is much of this. Battle resolution. Okay, there's 4 combat tables. What you're going to do is you determine the odds ratio. You pick the attacker's current morale. Well, you look it up. Okay, so I look here. I find the attacker's current morale factor. That's not it. That's a die roll. Interesting. So where's my attacker's current? The chart is based on which attacker's morale factor I'm taking. So if I'm at factor 1, I'll always be using this chart. Now, I look at my odds, which gets me a set. and I look at the defender morale, and I roll a die and get a result. Okay. Well. All attack. Now we go to melee. That's one of the results here. There are a number of different results that can come from this. So M is melee. All attacking and defending units are frozen in place. Neither side may withdraw from the melee nor change facing with any involved units. There's no markers for this, although there are some blank counters you can use for it. The defender must attack with all his meleeed units during his turn. He may add units to the melee so long as all original attackers are attacked. Missile units, which were involved from 2 spaces away, they're released from the melee, but they can be thrown into it by both sides. The original attacker may call upon any adjacent missile unit in range and its defense against the counterattack. The former attacker loses any bonuses he had for charging on subsequent attacks during the melee. And of course he won't get it while on defense either. A unit which is meleeed from flank or rear does not have to attack on its own turn, but it cannot move. The original attacker must attack again in his next turn and may add units to the attack. So if you get flank attacked in this, you don't really get a chance to recover from that. Someone else is going to have to save you from that, although you might be able to fight your way out the front if you're surrounded. Okay, the back result. The losing counter is moved back the number of hexes at the loser's option. And you'll have this like attacker back 2 here. The front face of the retreating unit must face the vacated hex. The victorious units may always advance into the vacated hex, and missile units firing from 2 hex range though can't advance. Restrictions regarding terrain and hex capacity apply to the retreat of the losing units. Units which cannot move back to the terrain restrictions, I don't know that there are any, but okay. Hex capacity or the edge of the board are eliminated. The back result applies to all units in the hex, even though only one of them was actually attacked, or was the attacker. If those other units were either being attacked or attacking in a separate action, they must delay their retreat until that attack is resolved on them. And then they must retreat if they're not eliminated. What this means is I think the order of combat could be important, because you could win a combat against a unit, thereby forcing a unit which wins a second combat to retreat anyhow. Route. The unit is moved back the number of hexes equal to its normal movement factor at the winner's option as to direction and route. The rear of the counter must face the vacated hex. You're fleeing. Friendly units in the same hex as the routed unit must also retreat as if routed. If they're adjacent to the routed unit, they must also retreat as if routed unless they're involved in a different attack, in which case they ignore the route. All units involved in a route which cannot meet route requirement, and there's no specification as to like repairing as there is in the back side, the back rules in terms of units in the same hex. So I don't know what to do with them. I think they avoid the battle. All units involved in a route which cannot meet the route requirements will be destroyed. If the victorious units can then advance 1 hex less than the number of hexes the loser routed, but the first hex of advance must be the loser's vacated hex. Okay. Exchange. Now this is an interesting concept. The attacker has his choice to eliminate any number of his factors in the attack. Okay, and if like I flip a unit, I'm losing 3 down to 2. I lost 1 factor. If I remove it, it's 3 factors. Then the defender must remove enough factors to equal the attacker's losses if he still has that many in the battle. Losses are taken by elimination of units or reducing steps. You may not maintain only part of a step. If the losses to be taken exceed a step, the entire unit must be eliminated. Exchanges include doubling considerations. What? This is the opposite of what was said earlier. Due to terrain and charge bonuses. I don't know what to do when there's an absolute contradiction again. Hope that the questions handle it. Missile units firing from 2 square range, this is weird, are immune to adverse effects, such as exchange, okay, and may never cause casualties of more than 1 step to any unit fired on from that range due to an exchange result. Okay, that doesn't sound like exchange anymore at all. And now they give an example of this weird construct, which is basically, okay, they fire, they get an exchange, the Cretans lose nothing, and the Mardians lose a step and are reduced to half strength. So you can cause single step losses at no cost to yourself by using missiles, which, conceptually makes sense, but the writing of this rule is just senseless. And without reading the example, you have no idea what they're talking about. And reading the example, all you can do is kind of apply it as a template and hope you understand. What scares the shit out of me about this is some people are writing in their comments for it, oh, this was such a simple game, the rules were so easy to learn. What? I don't think I was ever this clever. If 2 or more, and I used to be much, much more clever than I am now, so, if I'm really stupid, okay, I was always kind of stupid then, but I don't feel like these make easy sense. These do not feel, I don't know. Yeah, they're Don Greenwood affected rules. And quite simply, he seems to have picked up a lot of games that had really questionable rules as well to begin with. Unless he's not to be believed and he took really great rules and ruined them, which somehow I just don't accept. If 2 or more missile units combine in a missile attack at maximum range and get an exchange, the defender must remove an amount equal to 1/2 the number of attacking missile factors, whether it exceeds 1 step or not. Again, total has nothing to do with these other rules. Doesn't make sense in light of them, really. And it's kind of like, wow, you're just stringing together like these little concepts and special rules that don't hang together cohesively at all. How is anyone to remember this? I don't know. I'm not really going to worry too much about it. I'm going to slam some pieces together and see what happens. Fortunately, one of the other things people said was, this is an incredibly chess-like game, which means I'm going to bloody well hate it. If missile units attack, not that I hate chess that much, but I hate chess-like war games. If missile units attack in conjunction with other arms, a full exchange can be taken with no limitations, but the attacker must suffer losses from the other arms adjacent. Okay, he can't take losses from the immune archers, and I assume the archers don't add damage. Okay, how about half eliminated? Half of 1 unit is eliminated. A previously undamaged counter must lose 1 step and is turned over. Counters already half eliminated are removed. Okay. The unit, yeah. Okay, what about eliminated? 1 unit is eliminated. Units in the same hex with the eliminated unit must retreat, same as if they got a back result. The unit to be eliminated is decided by the loser, in this case, where there's more than 1 counter that could be affected. If applicable, 2 units may be half eliminated rather than losing 1 unit together at the loser's option. In the case of 4 above, both partial strength units involved in the loss must be retreated same as back, as well as any other units that are in the same hex. I think if you eliminate a single unit, there's no back effect, though. So, if there was another unit in the hex. And then they give some play balance suggestions of what to do if one player is better than the other. All right, since we took 1 break, let's take another. And we'll move into the advanced game. And you can see there isn't a lot left. But this stuff is pure comedy gold. And I don't know whether or not I'm playing with it. Okay, Excelsior. All right. So the first of the advanced rules isn't bad at all. The movement of units in the advanced game is more complicated, more realistic. Movement has to be through the hex side corresponding to the front. Units can always change their facing 1 hex side per turn in either direction for no movement point cost. Units can always change their facing 2 hex sides per turn at a cost of 1 movement point for each hex they want to do that in, and they can change it to a 180 about face for 2 extra movement points. Okay. That's great. That works fine. Now we get to their specialized maneuvers, and they throw the first one that's the best right out there. Highly trained infantry units were able to hold ranks while slowly walking backwards. Okay, I'm not entirely sure where he's getting this from, but all right, let's keep going. Therefore, allow all Class A units, that's these big ones, the phalanxes for the most part, and the heavy infantry, and all Greek infantry, we're talking hoplites here for the most part, to maintain their facing while moving backward in phalanxes by moving backwards through the hex side corresponding to the unit's rear defense factor at a cost of 2 movement points per hex. So for twice the cost that you can move forward, you can march backwards with a fucking phalanx. Units using retrograde may still change 1 hex side free of cost of each hex. Okay. I have never heard anything like this. I'm willing to accept that phalanxes might have been able to give back a little bit of distance. But what is our hex scale here? Do they tell us? They do not give us a scale on this. But it's just obscene. Now, again, maybe I'm completely wrong, but to me it feels like good old E. Gary was smoking some serious stuff on this one. I was so unbelieving of such an audacious claim that I had to look it up and see if I could find any evidence for it, but no. Hold on for a sec. Now, some of the others. Skirmishers retrograde. Archers and javelinmen were customarily used to skirmishing and didn't maintain close order ranks. Therefore, allow them to pay a movement point cost of 2 movement points for the first retrograde hex and 1 for the second. Hey, that's pretty cool. And I have no problem with light units able to run back. Okay. Here we come to more fun. Sidestep. This is not as ridiculous as the retrograde, and I'll go into why, and then we'll think back about the retrograde. Another maneuver which took considerable training was the sidestep, by which a unit moved either right or left while maintaining the same facing. Well, that again is just bullshit. I mean, again, you might do a couple of paces, but you weren't marching any portion of your movement allowance. Basically, you're allowed to move 1 hex to either side while preserving your present facing. The sidestep maneuver cannot be used in conjunction with any other movement in the same turn. It's not quite as ridiculous as the retrograde. Neither can it be used with enemy units adjacent at either the beginning or the end of move. Okay, so if these units were really immobile, I could kind of accept it, but you probably don't want to do this ever anyway, so I'm not sure why the rule is there. But the only units capable of the above are the Persian foot guards, which were fairly heavily armored, but not phalanx. Greece mercenaries on either side, and all Macedonian infantry types, which means the phalanx can do it. This could be considered semi-plausible in the sense that it's not that the whole phalanx is just walking, kind of doing this, I don't know what that term is. There was this exercise where you used to do sides, I think it was called sidestepping, where you do sidesteps back and forth. They're not doing something like that. They're actually peeling off parts, and it's a complicated maneuver which cannot be done in the face of the enemy. Of course, what it's missing is the concept of momentum. And that if forces do start moving forward, they're not going to start doing this for the most part. But it may be their way of trying to represent the oblique maneuvers that phalanxes were capable of, and perhaps some of the other units. Okay. What about the retrograde? I got nothing on this, man. I could see Romans being able to do something like this, not walking backwards, but some kind of pushing in individual maniples back and then others back and everything, and trying to cover with units in the middle as the front line rank moves back. I could see something like that being possible, because that is the concept behind the maniple, is this, or perhaps the concept behind the maniple is this idea of being able to keep fresh troops at the front by cycling things back. But you're not going to do this with a dense pike formation. Okay, cavalry maneuver. The main problem in maneuvering with cavalry was making one's orders heard above the din of battle. Away from the battle, this was less of a problem. Therefore, allow cavalry unlimited facing changes within a hex at the cost of one movement point if they begin their turn without enemy units in adjacent hexes. This is believable, but the problem with it has to do with implementing charges, and we'll see that in a moment. The charge bonus qualification. No unit qualifies for a charge bonus unless its last movement points expended in the turn was used in moving into the attacking hex. That is, units may not change facings within a hex side to expend movement points so as to qualify for the charge bonus. Yeah, but you're going to be able to swing those units around and charge right up against the enemy, so you can like run around their back and whip around and charge. I'm not sure how much I oppose this, but the extra movement point granted to any charging unit can be taken only if the last normal movement point of the charging unit is expended in moving into a new hex. Neither the movement bonus nor the last movement point may be expended to turn within a hex. Okay. I'm not quite sure entirely what that's saying, if it's trying to say that you have to go 2 straight hexes or otherwise. Here's another decent one. The Persian horse archers may make what is known as a split move. Basically, they move part of their move, they fire their missiles, and then they run back somewhere else. If they're firing at non-missile units, no problem. If they're firing at missile units, those missile units get to shoot back. Now, this is a little weird because there's no automatic return fire, I don't believe. There's the option that, you're able to fire back with defensive fire, and maybe or maybe not, you can also throw your missile fire into another combat. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think during a single turn, you may either fire missiles offensively, or you may, and that could include the defensive fire phase, which is of course offensive, or you can use your missile capability to help the defensive unit. Okay, horse archers, as in the basic game, do not receive a charge bonus while missile attacking from a 2 square range. I hope not. Skirmishers. Archers and javelinmen may freely pass through hexes which are fully occupied, either in advance or retreat, voluntarily or involuntarily, but these units cannot end their turn in a hex occupied by such an extent to disallow a unit of that size. Archers and javelin are not subject to the hex capacity while moving. Okay. I'm willing to accept that too. So the only one I'm really unhappy with is the retrograde here. All right. Then we come to play balance rules. And these are kind of interesting because, honestly, I don't think these are just play balance rules. These are also additional historical options. Let's see how they look. Besides acting as previously explained, chariots can attempt to attack the front face of phalanx units. Maybe. The chariots are moved into attack position. Charge requirements must be met, and before combat resolution begins, the following table is rolled. They may harmlessly pass through the phalanx. Yeah, that kind of suits definitely something Alexander did, stopping directly behind it and making no facing changes. They may successfully attack, or they may stop directly in front of it, horses balking and swerving with no attack made. I like this rule. I'm not sure it really helps the Persians. But I guess There might be occasional cases where they're willing to risk running their chariots there, which of course, historically, they ran their chariots right through the phalanxes. The phalanxes opened up for them and let them right through. So at least it allows for that. Morale cut, we're not going to play with this. It's just reducing one player's morale. Elephant roll. If an elephant is engaged in combat and the results of the battle call for either rout or back to the elephant's stampede, the direction of the stampede is determined by a random die roll. Stampeding elephants will go in a straight line in the charge movement right until off the board, and any unit in their path is trampled unless it is a phalanx whose front faces the elephant, in which case the elephant will turn and stampede in another random direction. However, if the die roll indicated in the new line of retreat is over the same phalanx unit, the elephants are considered to have trampled it. So they can still trample phalanxes from the front, which is hard to believe. Chances are the elephant would just die. Note, because the Mahmoud would kill it. Both enemy and friendly units are subject to elimination this way. Yeah, I don't know how much of a bonus that is for the person running the elephants, but okay. Macedonian play balance. Better training because they were elite and actually saved the day. Numerous times in Alexander's many battles allow the first phalanx, Hephaestus, companion cavalry, and the lancers unlimited hex size changes within a hex at the cost of only one movement point. Yeah, if I can remember to do that, sure. Morale cut. Phalanx immunity. Just as phalanxes cannot be frontally attacked by cavalry, chariots, or elephants, any attack made by a phalanx unit on cavalry, chariots, or elephants cannot adversely affect the phalanx unit. Okay. It's believable. The only question is, could the phalanx hit any of these things easily? But therefore, the results of the attack or back or rout are eliminated, partially or wholly are ignored, and this remains true regardless of any support given by missile units to the defending units. Exchanges do not hurt the phalanx but cause an automatic loss of step, I guess just one, for the defender. Okay, combined arms. Only the Macedonians are permitted to combine different types of units in a single attack. That is, they can attack with any combination of cav, infantry, and phalanx units. The Persians may only employ one type of unit in each battle, either cav, infantry, or chariots, or elephants. This restriction does not apply to missile units who are firing missiles. This rule reflects the innovation made by the Macedonians in using combined arms to attack. Ooh, I don't know about that. Certainly, the Macedonians perfected the art of combined arms, or at least utilized it better. But I don't know that there would have been a direct, that you couldn't have infantry sort of pinning down cav. The problem is that they wouldn't have aimed for it. We'll live with that. The game also has a historical setup, which I followed. It was a pain in the royal ass. One of the play balance things for the base game is, for the Persians, I think, force the Macedonians to set up their historical setup and then allow the Persian player to set up how they like. And this is if the Persian player is weaker. Well, normally when I'm playing one of these games, the weaker player has never played it before, right? And quite possibly has never played anything quite like it. I don't think there is anything quite like this. But they might not have any real experience with the Ancients' tactical battles at all. In which case, being able to change your setup is more likely to cause you to screw yourself up. Of course, you might be able to make a few modifications that are good, but you probably don't want to completely fiddle around with the setup. Now, it might be interesting as an option to think about, well, what if the deployment was more like this or whatever. And those are perfectly valid, especially if you're playing with the combined arms rule. And I think I'm going to play with all the optional rules. I'm not sure about that retrograde rule, just because I can't think of any way to justify it at all. Everything else I can kind of justify. That particular rule just, and that includes the sidestep, which I don't think has any value in the game, but maybe I'm missing something, and we'll see as we play. But the retrograde rule just is like, seems like pure fantasy to me. And maybe I'm completely wrong. If I am, let me know. But I can't find any justification for that thing. All right, let's end this up. Got just about an hour. That's not too bad, given the quality of the rolls. I'll be looking over some of the questions and the designer's notes before I actually start. Probably not going to get to play tomorrow until late again because well, work's gone crazy recently. There have been issues. So I'll be back.